In the corridors of power during one of history's darkest chapters stood a man whose mastery of communication shaped the destiny of a nation. His name was Joseph Goebbels. From the chaos of post-World War I Germany to the rise of Adolf Hitler, Goebbels would become the architect of a propaganda machine that enthralled millions, silenced dissent, and fueled unimaginable atrocities. He wielded words like weapons, understanding the power of rhetoric to ignite fervor, stoke fear, and demand loyalty. His speeches inspired devotion, while his films and posters created a world where lies were presented as truth. As Hitler's closest confidant, Goebbels built a narrative so compelling that an entire nation followed it into devastation. But behind the grandeur of his oratory and the bold slogans of his propaganda lay a far more sinister reality. His work was not merely a tool of influence. It was a force that sustained tyranny, dehumanized entire groups, and justified mass murder. What drove this man? How did he rise to power? And why did he remain loyal to a regime that brought such destruction? And what can we learn from the story of a man who manipulated millions through the power of words? This is the story of Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda maestro, a man whose work reminds us of the profound impact communication can have on history, for better or for worse. Joseph Goebbels was born on October 29, 1897, in the small industrial town of Rade in Western Germany. The son of working-class Catholic parents, Goebbels grew up in modest surroundings. His father worked as a bookkeeper, while his mother, a deeply religious woman, instilled in him a sense of discipline and ambition. From the beginning, his life was marked by struggle. As a child, Goebbels contracted osteomyelitis, a painful bone disease that left him with a permanent limp. This condition, coupled with his diminutive stature and clubfoot, made him a target for ridicule among his peers. He felt acutely the sting of rejection, yet it was in these early years that he developed a fierce drive to prove himself to the world. Books became his refuge. Immersing himself in the works of German philosophers, poets, and playwrights, Goebbels was drawn to the power of language. Literature gave him a sense of belonging and purpose. As he grew older, his talent for rhetoric emerged. Teachers and classmates alike noticed his ability to articulate his ideas with passion and precision. But Goebbels was not content to simply be a student. His ambition stretched far beyond the confines of Rade. He dreamed of becoming a writer, a novelist whose words would move people and secure him a place among Germany's literary elite. In 1917, Goebbels enrolled at the University of Bonn, where he studied literature and history. Later, he transferred to several other universities, including Freiburg and Heidelberg, where he earned his doctorate in German philology. By all accounts, Goebbels was an exceptional student. His academic work was thorough, his intellect sharp, and his determination unwavering. Yet, despite his achievements, he felt unfulfilled. Germany at the time was in turmoil. The First World War had brought devastation to the country. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919 left Germany humiliated and economically shattered. For young intellectuals like Goebbels, the promise of a bright future seemed increasingly out of reach. The nation's defeat and the instability of the Weimar Republic fueled discontent and a longing for change. It was in this environment that Goebbels began to search for a sense of identity and belonging. He wrote plays, essays, and articles, but his work failed to gain recognition. Publishers rejected his manuscripts, and his dreams of literary success remained unfulfilled. These rejections weighed heavily on him, exacerbating his feelings of inadequacy and resentment. By the early 1920s, Goebbels was a man adrift. He had talent, ambition, and a sharp mind, but he lacked a cause to channel his energy. His failure to break into the literary world deepened his frustration with the Weimar Republic, which he viewed as a corrupt and decadent regime. He began to gravitate toward nationalist ideas, drawn to their promise of restoring Germany's honor and strength. But his journey into the world of politics was not immediate. It would take another pivotal encounter, one that would change the course of his life and, ultimately, the trajectory of history. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future documentaries that explore the stories that shaped our world. In 1924, Germany was a nation teetering on the edge of collapse. The humiliation of the Treaty of Versailles, hyperinflation, and widespread unemployment had fractured society. Among the chaos, new political movements emerged, each vying to restore Germany's strength and reclaim its place in the world. It was during this turbulent time that a young Joseph Goebbels found his purpose. A turning point came in the autumn of 1924 when Goebbels attended a political meeting in the Rhineland. Among the speakers was Adolf Hitler, a man whose electrifying rhetoric captivated his audience. For Goebbels, this was no ordinary encounter. In Hitler, he saw not just a leader but a savior, a man he believed embodied Germany's future. In his diary, Goebbels wrote, "Hitler is the savior of Germany. I will follow him to the ends of the earth." This was not a passing admiration. It was a profound ideological awakening. Goebbels was entranced by Hitler's vision of national revival and racial purity. He saw in the Nazi Party a vehicle through which he could channel his own frustrations, ambitions, and talent for persuasion. After this meeting, Goebbels immersed himself in the Nazi movement. Though still a minor figure within the party, he quickly rose through the ranks thanks to his passion and sharp intellect. In 1926, he was appointed Gauleiter or district leader of Berlin. This role marked the beginning of his transformation into one of the most powerful voices in the Nazi regime. As Gauleiter, Goebbels faced an immense challenge. Berlin, the cultural and political capital of Germany, was a stronghold of leftist ideologies and staunchly opposed to the Nazi message. Yet, Goebbels relished the fight. He began crafting a strategy to win over the hearts and minds of Berlin's citizens. Using methods that were as innovative as they were manipulative, Goebbels understood the power of mass communication. He flooded Berlin with Nazi propaganda, using newspapers, posters, and public rallies to amplify the party's message. He was relentless in his efforts, refining his rhetoric to appeal to both the working class and the disillusioned middle class. Goebbels also pioneered techniques that would later define Nazi propaganda. He understood that repetition was key to persuasion. Slogans like "Germany Awake" were simple, direct, and emotionally charged, designed to resonate with a population desperate for change. In his speeches, Goebbels employed a combination of fear and hope. He painted the Weimar Republic as a corrupt and failing system while promising that the Nazi Party would restore Germany's honor and prosperity. His words were laced with anti-Semitism and scapegoating, laying the groundwork for the party's most destructive policies. Goebbels' talent for communication did not go unnoticed. Hitler, recognizing his potential, brought him further into the inner circle of the Nazi Party. The two men shared a vision for the future, and their partnership would become one of the most infamous in history. In his diary, Goebbels recorded his growing admiration for Hitler, writing, "He is the genius of our time. The more I know him, the more I love him." This devotion was not merely personal, it was ideological. Goebbels saw himself as a soldier in a movement destined to reshape the world. As his influence within the party grew, Goebbels began experimenting with new forms of propaganda. In Berlin, he orchestrated mass rallies that combined theatricality and spectacle, designed to evoke strong emotional responses. He utilized the emerging technology of radio to reach broader audiences, Recognizing its potential to unify and mobilize the population, Goebbels' methods were as effective as they were insidious. By 1928, the Nazi Party's influence in Berlin had grown significantly, and Goebbels was at the forefront of this transformation. His propaganda campaigns helped the party secure a foothold in the city, setting the stage for its eventual rise to national power. The turning point in Goebbels' career was not just his meeting with Hitler, but his realization of the potential of mass communication to shape public perception. He had found his calling, not as a writer or academic, but as a propagandist. From this moment forward, Goebbels would dedicate his life to the Nazi cause, becoming the architect of a machine that would manipulate millions and sustain a regime built on hatred and fear. In 1933, Adolf Hitler seized the reins of Germany, and with him came a new era of control over the nation's thoughts and beliefs. Joseph Goebbels, now elevated to the position of Reich Minister of Propaganda and Enlightenment, was entrusted with an unparalleled mission: to shape the hearts and minds of millions in service of the Nazi regime. Goebbels understood better than most the power of psychology. He knew that fear could paralyze dissent, that hope could inspire loyalty, and that pride could bind people to a shared cause. Through these emotional levers, he constructed a propaganda machine that infiltrated every corner of German society. No medium was spared. Newspapers, films, radio broadcasts, literature, theater, and even art were all commandeered to deliver the Nazi message. One of Goebbels' earliest triumphs came in 1934 with the orchestration of the Nuremberg Rally, a spectacle designed to project unity, strength, and loyalty to Hitler's vision. Over 700,000 people gathered in carefully choreographed formations, their synchronized movements creating a sense of collective purpose and power. The rally was not merely a political event. It was a theatrical production meticulously planned to inspire awe and obedience. Goebbels ensured that every detail, from the lighting to the music to the angles of the cameras, was tailored to evoke emotional resonance. The resulting film, Triumph of the Will, directed by Leni Riefenstahl, became a masterpiece of propaganda, portraying Hitler as a godlike figure and the Nazi Party as the salvation of Germany. But Goebbels' propaganda was not just about rallying support for the regime. It was also about identifying and vilifying enemies. At the heart of his strategy was the demonization of Jews, whom the Nazis blamed for Germany's economic struggles and social ills. Through newspapers, posters, and films like The Eternal Jew, Goebbels propagated vicious anti-Semitic stereotypes depicting Jewish people as subhuman and dangerous. These messages were not subtle. They were designed to provoke disgust and hatred, laying the groundwork for the atrocities that would follow. The film The Eternal Jew, produced in 1940, was one of the most infamous examples of this campaign. Its grotesque imagery and false narratives presented Jewish people as parasitic and destructive, reinforcing the Nazi ideology that justified persecution and ultimately genocide. Holocaust researchers today cite such propaganda as a critical tool in dehumanizing an entire group of people, making the unthinkable seem acceptable. Goebbels' reach extended beyond domestic audiences. During World War II, he played a central role in managing the flow of information to both German citizens and the international community. As the war progressed and German defeats mounted, Goebbels crafted narratives to sustain morale and obscure the regime's failures. He launched campaigns portraying German victories, exaggerating enemy losses, and emphasizing the heroism of German soldiers. At the same time, he stoked fear by warning of the consequences of defeat, painting the Allies as ruthless aggressors who would destroy Germany if given the chance. Even as the tide of the war turned against Germany, Goebbels refused to waver. In his speeches, he called for total war, urging the German people to make sacrifices and commit themselves fully to the Nazi cause. In 1943, following the devastating defeat at Stalingrad, Goebbels delivered his infamous Total War speech in Berlin's Sportpalast. With fervent energy, he declared, "Do you want total war? Do you want it, if necessary, more total and radical than we can even imagine today?" The audience, carefully selected and primed, erupted in thunderous applause. But behind the spectacle, cracks in the Nazi narrative were beginning to show. As Germany faced relentless Allied bombing campaigns and mounting casualties, Goebbels intensified his efforts to control public perception. He censored news of defeats, spread false reports of impending German breakthroughs, and called for unwavering loyalty to Hitler. His propaganda became increasingly desperate, relying on emotional appeals and outright lies to maintain order. Yet, the horrors unleashed by his work could not be undone. Goebbels' relentless campaign of hate and manipulation had not only supported the war effort, but had facilitated the Holocaust, enabling the systematic extermination of 6 million Jews and millions of other victims. His propaganda dehumanized those he targeted, reducing them to caricatures and stripping them of their humanity in the eyes of the German public. Goebbels' genius lay in his ability to exploit the deepest fears and aspirations of a nation, bending reality to suit the Nazi agenda. But this power came with horrific consequences. His propaganda machine did not simply inspire loyalty. It silenced dissent, justified persecution, and fueled a war that would devastate Europe and claim tens of millions of lives. By the end of the war, as Germany lay in ruins, Goebbels' work had left an indelible mark, not just on the Nazi regime, but on the history of propaganda itself. His innovations in mass communication revealed both the potential and the peril of wielding media as a weapon of control. By the spring of 1945, the once mighty Nazi regime was on the brink of annihilation. Germany lay in ruins, its cities reduced to rubble under relentless Allied bombing campaigns. The Third Reich's dream of global dominance had disintegrated, and so too had the propaganda empire that Joseph Goebbels had spent more than a decade constructing. With the Soviet Red Army advancing on Berlin from the east and Allied forces closing in from the west, Goebbels retreated into the heart of the collapsing Reich. He joined Adolf Hitler and other senior Nazi officials in the Führerbunker, a fortified underground complex beneath the Reich Chancellery. It was here in the final days of the war that Goebbels would make his last desperate stand for the Nazi cause. As Hitler's closest confidant, Goebbels remained unwavering in his loyalty. While others began to question the Führer's leadership or fled their posts, Goebbels stood by him until the very end. On April 30th, 1945, when Hitler committed suicide in the bunker, Goebbels delivered what would be his final public act of allegiance. He was present for the Führer's last instructions and wrote a farewell address intended to rally the German people, even as defeat was imminent. In the days that followed Hitler's death, Goebbels assumed the role of Reich Chancellor, a position he held for less than 24 hours. He understood that the war was lost and that the Allied forces would soon reach the bunker. Despite this, he refused to surrender, declaring in his final statement, "We will not abandon the fight. We will die as soldiers." But Goebbels' final loyalty to Hitler extended far beyond his own life. In one of the most chilling acts of the war, Joseph and his wife Magda chose to murder their 6 children rather than allow them to live in a world without National Socialism. On May 1st, 1945, Magda Goebbels summoned her children, ranging in age from 4 to 12, into the bunker's underground rooms. She gave them sedatives to put them to sleep. As they lay unconscious, a Nazi doctor crushed cyanide capsules in their mouths. The murder of their children was an act that defied comprehension, a twisted expression of loyalty to the Führer and the ideology they had embraced. Magda later told a confidant, "I do not want them to grow up in a world where the ideals of National Socialism no longer exist." For Joseph Goebbels, this final act was both a testament to his fanaticism and a horrifying culmination of the lies and hatred he had spent his life spreading. After ensuring their children's deaths, Joseph and Magda Goebbels prepared for their own suicides. Together, they walked into the garden outside the bunker, where they consumed cyanide capsules. To ensure their deaths, Joseph ordered an SS officer to shoot them both. Their bodies were then doused in gasoline and burned, following the same protocol Hitler had instructed for himself just days earlier. The deaths of Joseph and Magda Goebbels marked the end of one of history's most infamous propagandists. In the months and years that followed, the full extent of Goebbels' role in sustaining the Nazi regime and enabling its atrocities would come to light. His propaganda machine had not only manipulated millions, but had dehumanized entire groups, justifying the Holocaust and prolonging a war that cost tens of millions of lives. Goebbels' actions in those final days were not the desperate attempts of a man seeking redemption, but the calculated decisions of a fanatic who had built his life around an ideology of hatred and control. His loyalty to Hitler and National Socialism persisted to the very end, leaving behind a legacy of lies, destruction, and unimaginable loss. The story of Joseph Goebbels serves as a chilling reminder of the power of propaganda and the devastating consequences of its misuse. In the ashes of the Third Reich, his life stands as a testament to the dangers of weaponized information, a force capable of reshaping reality and enabling some of history's darkest chapters. Joseph Goebbels left behind a legacy unlike that of any other propagandist in history. His life and work are a stark reminder of the power of words and images to shape minds, control societies, and steer entire nations toward destruction. His methods were not innovations of ideology, but innovations of delivery, tools designed to manipulate and mobilize the masses for one of history's darkest regimes. Today, historians, sociologists, and political scientists study the strategies Goebbels employed not to glorify his work, but to understand the mechanisms by which propaganda can subvert truth and erode the foundations of a free society. His methods reveal the frightening ease with which lies, when repeated and reinforced, can become reality for millions. Goebbels' propaganda machine was built on three foundational principles: repetition, simplicity, and emotional appeal. His speeches and media campaigns relied on straightforward, memorable slogans, repeated endlessly until they became ingrained in the public consciousness. He understood that fear was a powerful motivator, often warning of external and internal enemies, whether it was communists, Jews, or allied powers, creating a constant sense of threat that demanded loyalty to the Nazi Party. His use of film, radio, and print media was unprecedented in scale and sophistication. Goebbels once wrote, "A lie told once remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth." This principle became the bedrock of his propaganda efforts, distorting facts to align with the Nazi agenda. It is a tactic that continues to resonate in modern media and political strategies, where disinformation campaigns and echo chambers can amplify untruths with devastating consequences. According to Dr. Alice Greenwood, media historian, Goebbels understood that the most effective propaganda isn't just about persuasion. It's about creating a worldview where people no longer question what they're told. This approach wasn't limited to Nazi Germany. In today's world, We see echoes of his methods in authoritarian regimes that control state media, in the spread of fake news, and in the use of algorithms that reinforce biases. Dr. Marcus Levine, a sociologist, stated that the internet has made Goebbels' strategies even more potent. The speed at which information and misinformation travels today is unparalleled. While his tools were films and radios, today we have social media platforms that can reach billions of people instantly. The principles are the same, but the scale is unprecedented. The human cost of Goebbels' propaganda cannot be overstated. His relentless campaigns of hate dehumanized millions, paving the way for policies of extermination and war. The legacy of Goebbels is not only a reminder of what was lost, but also a call to ensure that such loss is never repeated. When lies become truth, the cost is humanity itself. Let us never forget. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future documentaries that explore the stories that shaped our world.